The Hardcore Nuzlocke, a grueling Pokemon challenge run, which requires smart play, lots of game knowledge, and a little bit of luck. Now, I know a good chunk of the people watching this video might not be that familiar with Pokemon, so let me give you the super abridged version. Pokemon is basically a massive, overly complicated game of rock, paper, scissors where you make a team of 6 Pokemon who each have their own strengths and weaknesses and good and bad matchups, and then try to make your way through the game by defeating 8 gym leaders and a final gauntlet known as the Elite Four, along with a bunch of other trainers along the way, all with the goal of becoming the Pokemon Champion. The Pokemon series is the very definition of easy to learn, difficult to master. Because although the official games are easy enough to be beaten by a 10-year-old, there are enough mechanics hidden underneath the hood that even adults can struggle to account for everything. I will do my best to briefly explain things as they become relevant, so that you can follow along whether you're a Pokemon master or someone who has never even played Pokemon Go. The rules for a Hardcore Nuzlocke are as follows. You can only catch the first Pokemon you encounter in each area. If one of your Pokemon ever faints, it's considered dead and can no longer be used for the rest of the run. The battle mode is changed to set, so you don't get a free switch in after knocking out an opponent's Pokemon. You can't use items from your bag in trainer battles, and your team's levels are capped at the level of the strongest Pokemon from the next major story battle. So what would happen if I, Welsknight, a Minecraft YouTuber, attempted one of the hardest Pokemon challenge runs ever conceived? I've been playing Pokemon games for almost my entire life, since the late 90s, but I've never finished even a regular Nuzlocke before, much less a hardcore one. I've never played in competitive tournaments or VGC, and sure, I might have a lot of general knowledge about Pokemon, but would that alone be enough? Well, it's time to find out. I decided to attempt this challenge in Omega Ruby for the 3DS because it felt like it struck a good balance between old and new. It was released in 2014 as part of Generation 6, and although it includes a lot of the more modern mechanics like the physical special split, reusable TMs, a huge roster of different Pokemon, and convenient ways to customize your team, it's also a remake of one of the older Game Boy Advance games, which I played as a kid. So there would be a little bit of a greater sense of familiarity. To make things just a little bit more interesting, I decided to use a randomizer, but only for the Pokemon which I would obtain. The starter choices, wild Pokemon, and static encounters would be randomized into a different Pokemon of roughly equivalent strength to the ones you would normally find, but I banned legendaries, and I left everything else unchanged. Move pools, abilities, AI trainer teams, all of that kind of stuff would be left just like they are in regular vanilla Omega Ruby. I figured it was a good way to make the playthrough a little bit more unique, without turning it into a total mess where you couldn't plan for anything or where it would end up being completely centralized around overpowered legendary Pokemon. I also gave myself infinite rare candies and EV reducing berries, but because I'm playing with a self-imposed level cap, it's really just to save time, not to make the game easier. Lastly, I greatly increased the catch rate of all Pokemon to make sure that I wouldn't stumble across an early encounter which would be almost impossible to catch with a regular Pokeball. Also, quick note about the level cap, I decided to think of it as more of a soft cap, meaning that I wouldn't intentionally try to overlevel my Pokemon, and that I would do my best to stick to the cap, but if I did somehow accidentally go over it by a little bit, I wasn't going to stress about it or force myself to not use that Pokemon. I have not played Omega Ruby in years, and the game has an EXP share, and there are sometimes quite a few battles between the major story ones, with very few levels to work with. So I decided this was just the best way to go, and honestly, I can't remember if it even came up, but I thought I'd mention it, just in case. So now, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the run. I started my journey in Little Root Town, having just moved into my new house. I went next door to meet my neighbor May, and then heard someone screaming for help just north of town. When I went to investigate, I found Professor Birch being chased around by somebody's unleashed dog. I checked his backpack and found 3 Pokeballs and was given my first major decision of the run, the Pokemon I would choose as my starter. Thanks to the randomizer, my options were Elekid, Cleffa, and Gible. Elekid was out immediately because its final evolution is a trade evolution, which I did not have access to. And while its middle form, Electabuzz, is pretty decent, it's not nearly as good as the other 2. Now, I know a lot of you would snap pick the Gible because its final evolution Garchomp is insanely powerful. But it's actually a much more nuanced decision than you might think. You don't actually get Garchomp until level 48, which means that playing with level caps, you end up only having it for the very, very end of the game, the Elite Four. Cleffa, on the other hand, can evolve into Clefairy before the first gym, because all you need to do is make it like you. It's a friendship evolution, and its final form Clefable can be obtained roughly a third of the way through the game when you find a Moonstone. On top of that, Clefable is a fairly rare fairy type, and it has decent stats and the potential for a great ability. Ultimately, though, I decided on Gible, or Gible, however you pronounce it, for 2 reasons. First, it learns the move Dragon Rage at level 7, which always does exactly 40 damage and is downright OP in the entire early game and even up into the mid-game. Additionally, because my randomizer settings mean I'm likely to get a lot of weak Pokemon early, there was the potential to get almost nothing but bugs and birds, which would have a terrible matchup against the first gym leader, Roxanne. And Gible, with Dragon Rage, all but guaranteed I'd be able to beat her. The Gible I chose had a brave nature, which gave it 10% more attack, which is good, and also 10% less speed, which is very, very bad. I decided to nickname him Smaug. I soon made my way north to Oldale Town, where I got a tour from a pushy sales guy. I trained up Smaug to level 7 so he learned Dragon Rage, and then I went to meet up with May. She challenged me to a battle, and Smaug took out her Trico in a single attack. Then I returned to Little Root to get the Pokedex and some Pokeballs so our journey could finally begin. Oh, side note, I decided that the whole you can only catch the first Pokemon you encounter in each area wouldn't start until we actually had the ability to catch Pokemon, which was right now. I said goodbye to Mom, and like Bilbo Baggins from The Hobbit, despite my better judgment, I left home to go on an adventure. Our first catchable encounter was a Pidove on Route 101, who I named Kirinki. North of Oldale Town, on Route 103, I found a Blitzel, who I named Shadowfax. Well, more accurately, I forgot to nickname him when I caught him, but I renamed him later. Lastly, on Route 102, I caught a Bunnelby, who I named Bilbo. Eventually, I reached Petalburg City, where my dad works as the gym leader. I also met Wally for the first time and watched as he caught a Ralts. As thanks for standing around and doing literally nothing while Wally did all the work, he gave me an upgrade for my Pokenav, which gave me access to Super Training, a way to easily EV train my Pokemon. Now, for all the people watching who aren't Pokemon masters, let's take a quick second to talk about stats. All Pokemon have 6 stats: HP, Attack, and Defense, which are for physical moves, and then Special Attack and Special Defense, which are for special moves, and lastly, Speed. Each individual Pokemon also has 2 sets of hidden stats called Individual Values, or IVs for short, and Effort Values, or EVs, both of which have an effect on the total stats of the Pokemon. Individual values range between 0 and 31 and are determined at your birth. Think of it kind of like your Pokemon's genetics or natural talent. Basically, if a Pokemon is born with a 31 For its HP stat, it will have higher HP than a Pokemon that is born with 6 HP IVs. Effort values, or EVs, are gained by defeating other Pokemon, or by using Super Training. They're kind of like your Pokemon's education. You can have a total of up to 510 altogether, and no more than 252 in any one stat. Without getting into all the complicated math, basically all you need to know is that having higher IVs and more EVs for any given stat means that that stat will be increased by a pretty significant amount. So anyway, I spent a while in Super Training with Smaug to max out his attack and his speed EVs. On Route 104, I caught a Wurmple who I named Grima, and then I went full goblin raiding party and beat up the rich kid Zigzagoon to steal his lunch money. In Petalburg Woods, I caught a Tyrogue who I named Boromir. It had the Guts ability, and it would make a great addition to the team when it eventually evolved at level 20. I saved the scientist from the Team Magma Grunt, and was given the EXP share for my trouble. After exiting the woods, Smaug easily carried us through all the other trainers in our way, and Grima evolved into a Cascoon. When I finally reached Rustboro City, I ran into May again, and then I went to the Pokemart, bought a few Pokeballs. I also got the False Swipe TM from a guy inside the store, which would allow me to teach the move False Swipe to any of my Pokemon capable of learning it. It's quite useful for catching wild Pokemon. At the trainer's school, I grabbed the Quick Claw, an item which would give any Pokemon holding it a chance to go first in battle, and then I acquired the Cut HM, although we wouldn't actually be able to use it until we got our first gym badge. I had a few more encounters available to me at this point. I caught a Starly in Rusturf Tunnel, who I named Thorondor. I caught a Togepi on Route 116, who I named Arwen. This Togepi could have had 2 possible abilities: Serene Grace, which is insanely good and doubles the chance of secondary effects occurring, like flinch, or it could have had Hustle, which is insanely bad because it decreases the accuracy of your moves in return for making them stronger. Unfortunately, Arwen had Hustle. So Arwen is mostly useless, since minimizing the chances of bad RNG is so important for Nuzlocke. The less random stuff, the better. The last thing to do before taking on the final gym was to evolve Grima into a Dustox. The first gym is Rock type, which isn't a great matchup for most of our team, but Smaug's Dragon Rage carried us through the gym trainers really easily. Before fighting Roxanne, I used rare candies to get all of my Pokemon up to the level cap of 14, and Thorondor evolved into a Staravia, giving it the incredibly powerful ability Intimidate, which reduces my opponent's attack stat whenever Thorondor switches in. The plan for Roxanne was really simple: just click Dragon Rage and win. Roxanne's Geodude has the ability Sturdy, so it did survive the first Dragon Rage on 1 HP, but Smaug tackled as Roxanne healed with a potion and then finished the Geodude off with another Dragon Rage. Her Nose Pass came out next, but it also was no match for Smaug, the chiefest and greatest of calamities, and it went down to a single Dragon Rage, earning me the Stone Badge and the TM for Rock Tomb. After leaving the gym, I saw a Team Magma Grunt running off with some stolen goods and being chased by a scientist. After catching up, the scientist told me he needed my help to get his stuff back. So I chased the Team Magma Grunt to Rusturf Tunnel, where an old man outside told me that the Grunt had also kidnapped his beloved Pokemon Pico. I confronted the Grunt inside the tunnel where he had run into a dead end. Smaug took care of him easily, and I retrieved the Devon parts and Pico. The old man from before showed up and introduced himself as Mr. Briny, and he offered to help us out if we ever needed anything. We returned the Devon parts to the scientist and got another Pokeknife upgrade from the president of the Devon Corporation, who also asked us to deliver both the parts I had just recovered to Slateport City and a letter to a man named Steven in Dewford Town, because I guess the world of Pokemon doesn't have a mail service. Anyway, I asked Mr. Briny for a favor and sailed with him to Dewford. After arriving, I got the old rod from a fisherman, which I immediately used on Route 107 to fish up a Poochyena, because randomizers don't care about whether or not it makes sense. I named the Poochyena Keely. I also used the rod to fish within Dewford Town, and I found a Ralts, which I named Eowyn. Lastly, in Granite Cave, I found a Slugma, which I named Gimli. I EV trained Eowyn the Ralts and Thorondor the Staravia, and decided to take on the next gym, a fighting-type gym led by a guy named Brawly. Between my birds and Smaug, I was able to get through the gym trainers quite easily, and when I finally reached Brawly, he led with a Machop. I started out with Smaug. The first Dragon Rage brought Machop into the red, which caused Brawly to use his Super Potion. 2 more Dragon Rages finished the Machop off, but Smaug took a little damage in the process. Makuhita came out next, so I switched into Thorondor to lower its attack with Intimidate, while it hit me with a Sand attack, which lowered Thorondor's accuracy. A Wing attack and a follow-up Quick attack took it out, earning me the Knuckle Badge and the Bulk Up TM. With our second badge obtained, it was time to deliver the letter to Steven. I went into Granite Cave, where I found Steven contemplating the cave paintings like some kind of art critic. I gave him the letter, and he gave me the TM for Steelwing. Back outside, I hitched another ride with Mr. Briny, this time to Slateport City. I fought a couple trainers on the beach, cleared out a beach house to earn a nice deal on soda, and then went into the city itself. I grabbed the Alakazam Mega Evolution Stone from the market area, and also bought the Thunderwave TM. I had 3 more encounters now to take advantage of. So, I caught a Venipede on Route 110, which I named Pippet, a Sentret by fishing in Slateport, which I named Feely, and a Beldoom on Route 109, which I named Thorin. Back in Slateport, I went to deliver the Devon parts. But instead, I found a bunch of Team Magma Grunts, and one of them gave me the TM for the move Thief. I eventually found Captain Stern, who I was supposed to deliver the parts to, but Team Magma interrupted, so I put them in their place. With those errands out of the way, I went north to Mauville City. I worked my way through the first iteration of the Trick House and obtained the TM for Taunt, as well as a very useful Expert Belt, which is an item that increases the damage when using a super effective move. Next was the Route 110 encounter with May, which is actually a fairly scary fight, since her Whalmer can trap you with Whirlpool, and her ace Pokemon is level 20. To make matters worse, I did a stupid, and I was planning for the wrong team. For some reason, in my brain, I thought she was going to have the team for if I had taken the Fire-type Torchic as my starter. But she actually had the team as if I had taken the Water-type Mudkip. I led with Shadowfax, expecting to see a Shroomish, but was surprised when May led with Slugma instead. Shadowfax took it out with a couple of shockwaves, but took enough damage in the process that I would need to switch him out. May sent out her Whalmer next, and it was at this point that I realized I had prepared for the wrong team. I decided a sacrifice would be necessary, so I sent out Grima. Grima poisoned the Whalmer while getting trapped with Whirlpool, and then, like a valiant dwarf in the Mines of Moria, hung on against overwhelming odds to deal as much chip damage as possible before finally going down. I switched in Smaug to avenge Grima with a Dragon Rage, in conjunction with the poison damage, and then May sent out her final Pokemon, Grovyle. This thing's actually terrifying, because not only is it faster than Smaug, it also knows Pursuit, which deals massive damage if you switch out. My best option was to Dragon Rage twice, and basically hope for the best. And that's exactly what I did. Smaug dodged 2 crits and survived a Fury Cutter, on exactly 1 HP to secure the victory. I played that fight extremely poorly, and Grima paid the price for it. Even worse, I could easily have lost Smaug too. I promised to be much more careful in the future, and continued into Mauville City. There I ran into Wally again, who I'd have to battle before taking on Wattson's Electric-type gym. First though, I went to the Pokemon Center to box Grima forever. I replaced him with Bilbo the Bunnelby, who learns a couple of ground-type moves which would be useful against Wattson. Next, I went to the Pokemart and purchased a few useful TMs, including Bulldoze, which would be very useful for the upcoming gym battle. I also went to Rydell's Cycles and got the Mach Bike, and then I went to grab a few more encounters. I got a Pidgey on Route 117, who I named Biffer, a Squirtle on Route 118, who I named Samwise, and a Wooper on Route 111, who I named Barlaman. I trained Barlaman up to make them bulky, and I went to the gym. Outside, I took out Wally's Ralts with a single hit from Thorondor, and his dad gave me the Rock Smash HM afterwards. I went inside the gym and worked my way through the gym trainers, again without any real difficulties. And along the way, Barlaman evolved into a Quagsire. Eowyn evolved into a Kirlia, and Bilbo evolved into a Diggersby. Wattson, however, was really not a challenge. None of his Pokemon could really do anything to Barlaman, who easily soloed his entire team. There's not really much to talk about here. Use a ground-type move, take little to no damage, repeat. For winning, I earned the Dynamo badge and the very useful Volt Switch TM. Afterwards, I evolved Boromir into Hitmontop, giving me a second Intimidate Pokemon to add to the team, and I taught Bilbo Rock Smash. Now that I had Rock Smash, it was time to go back to the Trick House. I worked my way through the puzzles and got myself a Hardstone and the TM for Trick Room. Back in Mauville, I went north and got the Strength HM from May. I also caught a Remoraid there, who I named Boffer. Inside the Fiery Path, I caught a Cranidos, who I named Durin, and when I made it to Route 113, I found a Torchic, which I caught and named Galadriel. Unfortunately, this is where things went sideways. A mandatory random trainer on Route 113 had a Trapinch, and my Pokemon lead at the time was Shadowfax, who knew Volt Switch. Trapinch has the ability Arena Trap, which prevents switching out. And, to make matters worse, it's a ground type. Since Shadowfax was an electric type, he was at a massive disadvantage. Because Trapinch is a ground type, Volt Switch wouldn't work, and because of Arena Trap, he couldn't escape. So basically the only chance for him to survive was to get a critical hit with Facade, which was a 6.5% chance. But that didn't happen, and Shadowfax went down to a single super effective attack. Eowyn came in and avenged him, and then Smaug finished off the trainer's Electrike, but Shadowfax was gone for good. Honestly, the only way to avoid this would have been to check the teams of every single random trainer in advance, which admittedly is something I probably should have done, but eh. Afterwards, Smaug evolved into a Gabite, a fairly significant boost compared to Gibble, but also the last one he'd get, for a pretty long time. We soon made it to Fall Arbor Town, where I went to the Pokemon Center and met Lynette, the creator of the Pokemon PC boxes. I buried Shadowfax in the PC box, and I added Samwise the Squirtle to my team, who I immediately evolved into a Wartortle. May then recruited me to help out with some Team Magma shenanigans at Meteor Falls. On Route 114, I got an extremely lucky encounter by finding a Crocodile with the Moxie ability, which basically increases your attack whenever you knock out an enemy Pokemon. I caught him and named him Melkor. I also caught a Dugong in Meteor Falls, who I named Bomber. May and I beat up the Team Magma goons in a double battle, without any real difficulty. We met Team Aqua for the first time afterwards, but thankfully they weren't looking for a fight. Back in Fall Arbor, I got the Smackdown TM and then fast-traveled with May back to Mauville. I rode the cable car up to Mount Chimney, where Team Aqua and Team Magma were duking it out. I fought my way through a few goons before I finally reached their leader, Maxie. Boromir and Maxie's Mightyena traded Intimidates before I used Fake Out to flinch him and also get a tiny little bit of chip damage. I hit him with a low sweep, he snarled, and then I finished him off with another low sweep. Next out was Golbat, so I switched in Smaug. A pair of Rock Tombs took it out, and then Moxie's Ace came in. Camerupt. This thing is a terror. It's very bulky, and it hits like a truck. I switch in Thorondor to dodge and Earth Power, and then into Samwise on a Lava Plume, which deals very little. Samwise was holding an expert belt here, boosting the power of his super effective moves by 20%, and water-type moves deal 4 times the normal damage to Camerupt. So Water Gun had roughly a 50-50 chance to knock it out in one hit. Unfortunately, I rolled almost minimum damage and the Camerupt survived. Okay, that's probably fine. I still live as long as Camerupt doesn't get a... Oh, Camerupt got a crit and Samwise goes down. Rest in peace, my friend. A side note, can I just vent for a second about how stupid it is that in Generation 6, Wartortle doesn't learn a single water-type move with a higher than 40 base power until level 28? Squirtle gets Water Pulse a little bit earlier if you delay the evolution, but of course I didn't think of that until afterwards. I finished off the Camerupt, then retrieved the meteorite and started heading for Lava Ridge Town, where the next gym leader was. In Jagged Pass, I encounter and catch a Boltoy, which I named Ori. When I arrived in Lava Ridge, I buried Samwise, evolved Boffer into Octillery, and prepared my team for Flannery's Fire-type gym. I got the Swords Dance TM from the Black Belt near the shop, and then I got an egg from the old lady near the hot springs, which I will hatch later. I went into the gym and made my way to Flannery, dodging all of the other trainers along the way. She led with Slugma, and I led with Melkor the Crocodile. The Slugma can set up Light Screen and Sunny Day, so I used Taunt on the first turn to prevent that. Unfortunately, it went for Overheat instead, but Melkor lives the hit. The next turn, Melkor takes out the Slugma with a Bulldoze, and Melkor gains an attack boost for knocking it out, thanks to his ability Moxie. Torkoal comes out next, and although Bulldoze doesn't quite do enough to one-shot, it does a decent chunk, and Torkoal sets up the sun. Flannery healed the Torkoal with a Hyper Potion, but this time around Melkor got a critical hit, taking out the Torkoal and giving him another attack boost. At this point, Flannery's only remaining Pokemon is a Numel, who gets taken out easily, earning me the Heat Badge and the TM for Overheat. 4 badges down and 4 to go. After I left the gym, May showed up, and she gives me goggles so I can walk around in sandstorms. I fast traveled with her back to Petalburg, where my dad's normal-type gym was the next roadblock. I hatched the old lady's egg into a Purloin, which I named Nori, and then I started planning for Norman. He has 2 Slackings, who have god-tier stats, but can only attack every other turn, due to their terrible ability, Truant. This fight could be easily cheesed if I had the move Protect, which of course the recently deceased Samwise learns naturally, but unfortunately the TM for that move isn't available until later in the game. So I spent a while staring at my box, doing damage calculations, and basically just trying to come up with a plan. I struggled for almost an hour trying to find a way to get through this fight without losing a Pokemon. Finally, after browsing through my TMs, I got an idea. I evolved Galadriel into Combuskin, put together my team, and went into the gym. The gym trainers themselves were no problem. They all use an item on the first turn, basically giving you a free attack. Norman himself would be the only challenge to be found here. The battle started with Norman sending out his first Slacking, and I led with Melkor. The answer to this battle was the move Dig. Because Melkor has maxed out speed EVs, he's able to outspeed the Slacking. Since Dig is a 2-turn move, I could dodge whatever Slacking was doing on its attacking turn, and then pop out of the ground and smack him during the turn he was loafing around, and then just repeat the process over and over again. When Slacking got low, I even managed to sneak in a couple of power-up punches to further boost Melkor's attack. The first Slacking went down, and Melkor got a Moxie attack boost. Norman's Vigoroth went down to a single crunch, giving me another Moxie boost, and by the time Norman's second Slacking came out, Melkor was at +4 attack. And a single Dig was enough to take it down, earning us the Balance Badge and the TM for Retaliate. Outside, I ran into Wally again and got the Surf HM from his dad, and then Wally and I went back to Mauville, where my journey would continue. I evolved Eowyn into Gardevoir and taught Surf to Barlaman. After a short surfing section on Route 118, I talked to another fisherman and was given the Good Rod. Next, I ran into Steven, and Latius showed up looking for help. We rode on Latius's back to a southern island, where we found Latios and some Team Magma goons. Steven and I took down the goons easily, and as a reward, I gained access to Mega Evolution. Latios also decided to join me, but since it's a randomizer, it became a Haxorus instead. Which is actually better for me, since Haxorus is not a legendary and I can actually use it. It had the ability Rivalry, which boosts its damage when fighting Pokemon of the same gender, but lowers it when fighting Pokemon of the opposite gender. I named it Scatha, and caught a ride with Latius back to the mainland, where I continued onwards towards Four Tree City. Before getting there, I had a couple of errands to run first. Near the start of Route 123, I raided the berry farm, and on the route itself, I caught a grass-form Wormadam, who I named Radagast. I went to the Weather Institute to find more Team Magma shenanigans going on, so I cleared them out with Scatha, and I got a Perugly from one of the employees as a reward, who I named Shelob. After leaving the Weather Institute, I had another battle with May, but she went down easily and she gave me the Fly HM. I finally reached Four Tree City, but there wasn't a lot to do here yet. I followed Steven to Route 120, where I caught a Dusclops, who I named Saruman. When I finally caught up to him, he gave me the Devon Scope so that I could see invisible Pokemon, and after taking out the Audino that appeared, Thorondor evolved into Staraptor. I then returned to Four Tree City to challenge the 6th gym. First, though, I had to prepare. I evolved Durin into Rampardos and leveled up Bomber to the level cap of 35. As usual, the regular gym trainers really weren't much of a problem, and I reached Winona without an issue. Winona led with Swellow, and I led with Scatha. On the first turn, I used Dragon Dance, boosting my attack and speed, and her Swellow used Aerial Ace. With the stat boots from the first turn, a single Rock Tomb was enough to take it out. Altaria came out next, since it knows a super effective attack against Scatha in Dragon Pulse, but unfortunately for Winona, after Dragon Dance, Scatha is faster, and could take out Altaria with a single Dragon Claw. Skarmory was next in line, who is incredibly tanky against physical attacks. Even though I wasn't doing great damage, Skarmory couldn't really do much to me either, so I was able to take it out in about 3 turns. Last was Pelipper, who went down in a single hit as well, although it did take a couple of turns due to a miss and then the fact that Pelipper can stall with Protect. I earned the Feather Badge and the Roost TM for my victory. Along the way to Lilycove City, I caught an Ariados on Route 121, which I named Ungoliant. I hit up the Safari Zone to catch a Snubbull, which I named Halbarad, and I snagged a Pikachu on Route 122, which I named Bard. I also got a Totodile in Mount Pyre, which I named Gilgalad. When I did eventually reach Lilycove, I ran into May again, near the department store, but a couple Dragon Dances from Scatha, and I swept through her entire team with ease. I hit up the department store to buy a bunch of useful TMs, and then I decided to run some errands. I figured now was as good a time as any to take advantage of our recently obtained Fly HM to go back and pick up a whole bunch of stuff that I'd already skipped or missed. So I went to Verdanturf to grab a couple of Mega Evolution Stones. I caught Dwalin the Mime Jr. on Route 105, Aomer the Luxray on Route 106, Isildur the Scorpy on Route 108, and Goldberry the Azuril at C. Mauville. I returned to the Trick House to take on a few more puzzles and get the Smoke Ball, Magnet, and a Red Tent secret base decoration as a reward. I grabbed a few TMs I had missed, like Toxic and Fiery Path, and most importantly, I caught a Marshtomp on Route 123, who I named Melian. This is actually an incredibly lucky encounter. because not only is Swampert an excellent Pokemon with only a single weakness to Grass-type moves, I actually have the Mega Evolution Stone for it. I immediately added her to the team, evolved her into Swampert, and gave her the Swampertite. Now it was time for more Team Magma buffoonery. I went to Mount Pyre, where I made my way to the summit and cleared out the goons and their admin, Courtney. I collected the blue orb, then followed Team Magma to Slateport. Unfortunately, I got there a little bit too late, and they stole Captain Stern's submarine. I took out the handful of grunts they left behind, and chased them back to their secret hideout near Lilycove. Inside the hideout, I caught a victory bell, which I named Treebeard. After taking out a literal horde of goons, I faced off against Courtney and her Camerupt again, but it went pretty much exactly the same as last time. With the base cleared, I took a detour to Moss Deep City for my next gym badge. I caught a Shellos along the way on Route 124, which I named Mary. In preparation for the Psychic-type twins I'd be facing, I evolved Keely into Mightyena, and I leveled up Soromon, and then went inside. I was able to avoid all of the gym traders, and I went straight to Tate and Liza. Their only Pokemon are a Solrock and a Lunatone, and only Solrock has damaging non-psychic type moves. So I led with Melkor and Saruman, and on the first turn I had both of them attack Solrock, although Melkor took it out with a single crunch. Saruman used Dark Pulse, which did roughly a quarter to the Lunatone, but since it only had Psychic moves and Dark Pokemon are immune to Psychic moves, this fight is completely free at this point. I swapped Saruman for Keely and I finished the battle. I got the Calm Mind TM and the Mind Badge for my trouble. When I left the gym, I was greeted with a cutscene. Apparently, shocker, Team Magma had been up to no good while I was in the gym. Steven gave me the Dive HM and some scuba gear to go deal with it because, threats to the entire world should definitely be left in the very capable hands of 10-year-olds. With our new level cap, I was able to evolve Thorin into Metang and then into Metagross, so I did. Now, as a perfect demonstration of why world-ending threats should not be left to 10-year-olds, I decided to go do a few other things first, now that I had access to Dive. I went to see Mauville to collect the Ice Beam TM and a bunch of nuggets, as well as the Beedrill Mega Evolution Stone. I also went to Sutopolis City, where my final gym badge was waiting for me, although I wouldn't actually be able to go into the gym until after the current crisis was handled. However, I could grab the TMs for Brick Break and Infestation right away, and they might come in handy later. Brick Break especially. I also took this time to grab a few more encounters. Baron the Panseer was caught on Route 126, Idril the Goomy in Shoal Cave, Tuor the Illumise on Route 125, Denethor the Sea King on Route 124, Elwing the Chatot on Route 128, Elendil the Cubone on Route 129, Luthien the Elegem on Route 130, and, last but not least, Huron the Spoink on Route 131. I visited Pacifidlog Town, where I got the Psyshock, Fling, and Return TMs, and while I was there, I also caught a Duosian, who I named Gandalf. Lastly, I surfed west from Pacifidlog, and I caught Faramir the Snivy on Route 132, Finway the Piplup on Route 133, and Frodo the Tepig on Route 134. 3 starters in a row. Kind of abnormal. With all that out of the way, I returned to Moss Deep to get ready to save the world. I surfed south to where Team Magma was hanging out, and I caught an Aggron on Route 127, which I named Aragorn. Another excellent addition, which we have the option of Mega Evolving. Not bad. I made my way into Seafloor Cavern, where I caught a Gothitelle, one of my least favorite Pokemon, and I named it Lobelia. I worked my way through the boulder puzzles and the Team Magma grunts, I grabbed the Earthquake TM, and eventually I arrived at the deepest chamber of the cavern where the leaders of Team Magma and Team Aqua were arguing. Once he noticed me, Maxie challenged me to a battle. He led with Mightyena, and I sent out Skatha. Dragonclaw dropped the dog, and Weezing came out next. I swapped into Thorin the Metagross, and I used Zen Headbutt to take it out. Crobat was next, and although Thorin could have dealt with it easily, I needed to have Melian already on the field when Maxie's final Pokemon, Mega Camerupt, showed up, so I swapped her in. I Mega Evolved Melian into Mega Swampert, and I fired off Rock Slide, which missed. The next one took out the Crobat, but not before Melian had taken roughly a quarter of her health and damage. Maxie's final Pokemon was the Mega Camerupt, which hits very hard and is very bulky, and I had nothing that really wanted to switch in and eat one of its moves. Thankfully, my answer, Melian, was already on the field, so a single Earthquake from Melian dropped it, winning me the battle. Afterwards, Maxie decided to be a sore loser and woke up Primal Groudon despite me just defeating him in honorable combat. The Groudon left the area, bringing about intense sunlight across the whole world. Steven showed up as I left the cavern, and with Maxie instantly regretting his life choices, we tagged along with everyone else to Sootopolis City. There I met Wallace, the final gym leader, while he was talking with Steven. After some cutscenes, I went into the Cave of Origin to confront Groudon. I found it at the very bottom of the cave, and after a brief ride on its back, the battle began. It randomized into a Regigigas, which I caught in a Master Ball. I named it Iru Aluvitar and sent it to the PC, where it will remain forever since I'm not allowed to use legendaries, even the bad ones. And with that, the world was saved. I could get back to far more important things, like earning my last gym badge and becoming the Pokemon champion. The last gym leader on my hit list was Wallace, who is a water-type specialist, but before taking him on, I popped back into the Cave of Origin to get an encounter. I caught a Magby named Glowin, and then I also caught a Weedle by fishing in Sootopolis City, who I named Azog. I spent a while planning for Wallace, who does have a couple of scary Pokemon, before entering his gym. After solving the icy floor puzzles and fighting a couple gym trainers, I eventually reached Wallace, who started the battle with a Love Disc. I led with Faramir the Superior, who took it out with a single Giga Drain. Milotic came out next, which is by far Wallace's scariest Pokemon. I used Calm Mind to boost my special attack and special defense, which would guarantee a kill with Grass Knot next turn, thanks to the Miracle Seed Faramir was holding. All I needed to do was dodge a single freeze from Ice Beam, which only has a 10% chance of happening. And I did. With Milotic out of the way and Calm Mind boosting Faramir's special attack, the rest of his team went down without a hitch. For winning, I was given the Rain Badge and the HM for Waterfall, which is one of the few HM moves that is actually good in battle. So I taught it to Melian right away. With all 8 of the gym badges now mine, I climbed the waterfall at the entrance to Evergrande City. I stopped briefly at the Pokemon Center before heading into Victory Road, the final test before the Pokemon League, which is, of course, the home of the Elite Four. The first trainer I came across had a Rhyperior, who nearly took out Melian with a critical hit Drill Run, which would have been disastrous. But I made it out with the whole team intact. My encounter for Victory Road was a Fearow, which I caught and named Owen. Honestly, I was kinda hoping for something better. The next trainer I fought had a Frostlass, who ended up being a massive pain to deal with. I might have been able to take it out with a single Shadow Claw from Scatha, but I didn't want to risk leaving him in on an Ice type. So for the next several turns, I tried to pivot through an onslaught of Confuse Ray, Shadow Ball, and Wake Up Slap. I finally managed to finish it off, but again, the fight got a little bit dicey. This had not been a great start to Victory Road. Thankfully, the rest of the fights against generic trainers went a lot more smoothly. I eventually reached the end, where I found Wally waiting for me. Despite how easy Wally has been in our previous battles, this one is honestly a surprisingly scary fight. Because in order to just get through Victory Road, I needed to dedicate 2 of my 6 team slots to Pokemon who were mostly just around for useless HM moves. And on top of that, Wally's ace Pokemon is a fast and pretty hard-hitting Mega Gallade. Wally led the battle with Altaria, and I sent out Scatha, who used Dragon Claw to take out the Altaria before it could do literally anything. Next was Delcatty, who can be very annoying because it has the move Sing, which puts you to sleep. Still, this was my best chance to set up a Dragon Dance, which was the easiest way to deal with Mega Gallade. Unfortunately, the Delcatty used Charm, reducing my attack by 2 stages, which completely negates the 1-stage boost I'd gotten from Dragon Dance, and then some. So I swapped into Thorondor on a disarming voice, which did very little damage, and then Thorondor took out the Delcatty with close combat. Magneton came in next, so I swapped into Melian and tanked a Flash Cannon. I Mega Evolved into Mega Swampert and used Power-Up Punch. Since Magneton has the Sturdy ability and can't be knocked out in one hit, I figured I might as well get an attack boost. A second Power-Up Punch was enough to finish it off, and with +2 to her attack, Melian took out Wally's Roserade with a single Earthquake. Last up was the Mega Gallade. It hits like a truck, but thanks to Speed EVs and the attack boosts, Melian was able to outspeed and take it out with a single Earthquake, winning me the battle. Wally gave me a Dawnstone afterwards, and I finally reached the last destination in my journey, the Pokemon League. Even though the end of my journey was in sight, there was a lot of preparation to be done first. I evolved Smaug into Garchomp and Galadriel into Blaziken. After double-checking everything, I realized I still had a couple encounters left unclaimed. I caught Theoden, the Dratini, on Route 115, Fingless the Igglybuff in Mirage Forest, and a Uxie in the Pathless Plain, which I can't actually use because it's considered a legendary. I caught Smeagol the Typhlosion in Nameless Cavern, Iorith the Delcatty in Lilycove City, and last but not least, Legolas the Grovyle in Mossdeep. Next, I went on a collecting spree, grabbing all the important TMs I had missed, like U-Turn from Mauville City, Dragon Claw from Meteor Falls, and Flamethrower from Victory Road. It was also in New Mauville that I got my final encounter of the run, and it was trash. Literally, I caught a Trubbish and I named it Snaga. Finally, it was time to put my team together for the final gauntlet of this journey. I spent about 8 hours or so over the course of 2 days, formulating my team, running damage calculations, exploring options, and ultimately trying to come up with a plan that was as close to risk-free as I could get it. I had already come this far, and I wanted to do everything in my power to make sure that I was going to emerge from the Pokemon League as champion, because a loss at this point would be devastating. I finally settled on the following team. Scatha the Haxorus, holding a Persim Berry and running Dragon Claw, Brick Break, Shadow Claw, and Dragon Dance. Melkor the Crocodile, holding an Expert Belt and running Earthquake, Crunch, Brick Break, and Power-Up Punch. Saruman the Dusclops, holding an Eviolite and running Shadow Ball, Ice Beam, Charge Beam, and Will-O-Wisp. Bard the Raichu, holding a Magnet and running Thunderbolt, Grass Knot, Nuzzle, and Volt Switch. Eowyn the Gardevoir, holding a Citrus Berry and running Dazzling Gleam, Psychic, Charge Beam, and Calm Mind. And Thorondor the Staraptor, holding a Citrus Berry and running Brave Bird, Close Combat, Retaliate, and U-Turn. Now, you may be wondering why I didn't bring Smaug the Garchomp, Melian the Mega Swampert, or Thorin the Metagross. Well, Smaug and Scatha basically fulfill the same role, a fast, hard-hitting, physical dragon-type sweeper. However, Smaug has a negative speed nature, and as it turns out, also has really bad IVs, meaning Scatha's stats are considerably better. And the difference in speed meant that Scatha could outspeed some of the Pokemon in the fights ahead that Smaug couldn't. On top of that, Smaug has a 4x weakness to Ice, and also doesn't have access to Dragon Dance. So for the upcoming series of battles, Scatha would just do everything that Smaug could do better. Melian the Mega Swampert and Thorin the Metagross were a bit more of a judgment call. After all my time spent planning, I was left with one slot on the team, which I could have used for either of them. Everyone else was critical for some reason or the other. The thing is, neither of them really helped that much against any of the battles ahead. They weren't bad, necessarily, they just weren't exceptionally good either. They were just kind of an extra body. What the team really needed was a bulky pivot in case things went wrong. And honestly, there was no better option than Saruman holding an Eviolite. Eviolite is a held item, which boosts the defense and the special defense of a Pokemon that holds it by a whopping 50%, with the caveat that that Pokemon is not fully evolved. Dusclops, which was originally a final stage Pokemon, who eventually gained another evolution years later, is slow as molasses, but it has a sky-high 130 base defense and special defense. So, for comparison, the literal god of the Pokemon universe, Arceus, only has 120 base defense and special defense. So, while holding an Eviolite, Dusclops essentially has 195 in both of its defensive stats as a base, which is better than God, apparently. That is absolutely absurd. By maxing out its HP EVs, I could guarantee that it would live at least a hit, or several in most cases, from absolutely anything that I would be facing. And on top of that, it could support the team well with Will-O-Wisp, and deal a little bit of damage here and there with Shadow Ball or Ice Beam. And so, Saruman the Dusclops took the final slot on the team, even over other potential powerhouses like Mega Swampert, Metagross, Blaziken, Dragonite, Serperior, and all the others that I considered. So, with all of the preparations finally complete, it was time. The first fight was against Sidney, a Dark-type specialist. He led with Mightyena, and I started out with Scatha. Mightyena's Intimidate lowered Scatha's attack as they came out, so I Dragon Danced on the first turn to get it back to neutral. The Mightyena then missed a Swagger, but I had a Berry to cure the confusion anyway, so it didn't really matter. From here, Scatha was able to outspeed and sweep Sidney's entire team with Brick Break. The next fight was Phoebe, who uses Ghost types. Unfortunately for Phoebe, Melkor is faster than her entire team, and with an Expert Belt, can take them all out with Crunch, as it continues to gain more and more Moxie boosts. So, easy fight. The first fight with the potential for something to actually go wrong was next. Glacia, the Ice-type specialist. There are essentially two things that make this fight an RNG nightmare. First, she has two Frostlasses, who have an ability called Snowcloak, which gives them a 20% evasion chance whenever it's hailing. Second, her ace is a Walrein, which is bulky enough to be difficult to take down in a single hit, and it knows the move Sheer Cold, which is a move that only has 30% accuracy, but if it connects, it always gets a KO. Although it might seem counterintuitive to send out a dragon against a team of ice types, I started out with Scatha against the first of her two Glalis. This Glalie knows the move Ice Shard, a super effective move, which won't KO Scatha even with a critical hit, but it will always go first, regardless of how fast I am. However, it also knows Hail and Light Screen, which it is very likely to use on the first turn. Anything except for Hail is fine here. If Glalie does use Hail, then those two Frostlasses I mentioned earlier will have their Snowcloak ability come online. And also, all of Phoebe's Pokemon not named Glalie know the move Blizzard, which has perfect accuracy during Hail. And that move would always KO Scatha in a single hit, so there's basically no margin for error here. I have two options. Without an attack boost from Dragon Dance, Scatha is capable of taking out everybody on Glacia's team in a single hit before they have a chance to do anything, except for Walrein. But Walrein is such a threat that there'd be a decent chance I'd lose a Pokemon to it before I could bring it down. The other option is to Dragon Dance on turn 1 and get the needed attack boost to one-hit KO the Walrein. But then, if Glalie sets up Hail, I'm essentially praying that neither one of the Frostlasses dodge my attacks. And there's roughly a 36% chance that at least one of them will. I spent almost 2 hours on this fight alone when I was preparing, trying to find an answer to this conundrum, trying to find a way to all but remove the RNG from the fight, and to give me an almost guaranteed way to get through it without risking an important member of the team or being forced to sacrifice someone. On one hand, you have a 30% chance that Walrein will get a one-hit KO with sheer cold. On the other hand, you have a 36% chance that one of the Frostlasses will dodge an attack. It's not a great situation. I finally found the solution in an unlikely place. Accuracy. Scatha can actually learn a TM move called Hone Claws, which boosts your attack and your accuracy. The thing with Hone Claws, and the reason it took me so long to think of this, is that it's almost never used over better, more general boosting moves like Dragon Dance or Swords Dance. The majority of the time in Pokemon, accuracy is pretty much irrelevant because all or most of the moves I'm using already have 100% accuracy. But by having Scatha hold an accuracy boosting Wide Lens and having him use Hone Claws on the first turn, he would get both the needed attack boost for Walrein, while also getting an accuracy boost to completely negate the evasion boost that the Frostlasses would have in Hail. At least I think that's how it works. It was surprisingly difficult to confirm the mechanics on how accuracy boosts interact with Snowcloak specifically. Anyway, the speed boost that I would normally get from Dragon Dance was irrelevant here because Scatha was already faster than Glacia's entire team without it. And ultimately, it played out exactly like I thought it would. With the help of the rarely used move Hone Claws, Scatha swept through Glacia's entire team one by one before they had a chance to do pretty much anything. The final member of the Elite Four was Drake, the Dragon Master. Unfortunately for him, Eowyn can simply set up a Calm Mind on his lead Altaria, who can do nothing threatening in return, and then Eowyn can just sweep through his entire team with Dazzling Gleam. Because Eowyn has max speed EVs and a timid nature, which further boosts her speed by an extra 10%, she's even faster than Drake's ace, Salamence. Last, but certainly not least, was Steven, the current champion, and the man I'd have to defeat in order to claim his title for myself. At least to my knowledge, Steven is the only AI trainer in Omega Ruby, prior to the postgame, who has a full team of 6 Pokemon. And he's got a few good ones. His lead Pokemon Skarmory is almost impossible to kill with physical attacks, and it knows Toxic, so it can stall you out or it can set up entry hazards with the move Spikes. Both his Skarmory and his Aggron have the Sturdy ability, so neither one of them can be taken out in a single hit. Steven's Claydol can set up defensive screens, having the damage of all of your attacks. His Credilli can recover with Giga Drain, or if you're really unlucky, get a boost to all of its stats with Ancient Power. His Armaldo is immune to critical hits thanks to its ability, and it hits pretty hard. And his scariest Pokemon, possibly the scariest Pokemon in the entirety of the run, is a Mega Metagross. It is very fast, it is very bulky, it has a massive attack stat, it has an ability which further boosts the power of all of its moves, and on top of all of that, it has good typing too. It could be an absolute run killer if you're not prepared for it. So I led with Bard the Raichu against his Skarmory. His Skarmory is likely to do one of two things here, either set up a layer of spikes or use Toxic. I have a 25% chance to avoid both if I use Nuzzle to paralyze it, but I decided it's better to drain Steven of his healing items instead, so I used Thunderbolt, triggering its sturdy ability and knocking the Skarmory down to 1 HP. Naturally, the Skarmory attacked me instead of doing what I expected, but in this case it's actually better for me that way. I went for Thunderbolt again while Steven healed using a full restore, and finally a third Thunderbolt took the Skarmory out. Next came Aggron. I know that a ground-type move is coming here, so I needed to switch out. I can't afford to use Volt Switch, because I actually need to be able to set up on this Aggron, which I might not be able to do if Volt Switch got a crit, so I hard switched into Throndor to get off and Intimidate, dodging an Earthquake in the process, and dropping Aggron's attack. Next, I U-turned out into Melkor, who shrugged off the incoming Stone Edge, which was meant for Throndor. I live even a critical from anything that Aggron could do here, so I went for Power Up Punch to get an attack boost, I ate an Iron Tail, and then I finished off the Aggron with an Earthquake, gaining an attack boost from Moxie. Now that Melkor was at +2 attack, the battle was essentially over. Melkor's faster than everything else on Steven's team, and could take them all out in a single hit. And it has too much health to risk dying, even to a critical hit from Mega Metagross's Priority Bullet Punch. The rest of his team fell to Melkor as he continued to accumulate Moxie boosts, and by the time Mega Metagross hit the field, Melkor was able to take it out with a single Earthquake, completing the challenge and winning me the run. I followed Steven into the back room, and I enshrined my team forever in the Hall of Fame. This has been a journey, in more ways than one. I've always wanted to finish a Nuzlocke, but despite a couple of attempts I've started in the past, my ADHD brain has always stepped in at some point midway through and told me to go do other things instead, just leaving those runs abandoned. I've also never really made a long-form video like this before, or written a lengthy script for a video. I've probably spent more time editing this video than any other video from my entire decade-long YouTube career. But now I have done it. It's finished. I have successfully completed one of the hardest Pokemon challenges ever conceived, and not only that, I managed to turn it into a video which I'm actually pretty proud of. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. I do want to give a special thanks to GlitchX City for creating most of the music used in this video, as well as Keith Montalbo for creating the little Welsknight Pokemon trainer art. There are links in the description below if you're interested in checking them out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.